Mary Tyler Moore created two of the most important women on television, Laura Petrie and Mary Richards. Over the years, we've grown up with them, but few of us realized the personal pain and anguish that Mary Tyler Moore faced while she was building her television empire. Alcoholism, coupled with diabetes, the tragic accidental death of her only son, and her younger sister's drug overdose.
It is the smile America grew up with, at one point a symbol for the confident spirit of the early 1960s. Then evolving in the 1970s to reflect the wry and wistful resolve of a generation coming of age. And on occasion disappearing altogether, hidden beneath the brittle facade of a character lost and alienated. Over the years, as a dancer, singer, comedian, and actress, Mary Tyler Moore has uniquely captured the personality of our popular culture.
Oh, stop!
Using her portrait of the all-American woman as an ingenue, a working girl, a wife, a mother, her work recognizes an American spirit which is courageous, yet vulnerable.
I recognized there was something unique about Mary's personality the first time I saw her.
Thank God she's tough, because she's had more dreck than most people need or should have.
We're cheating her to say all-American girl. She's that and other things at the same time.
It is perhaps an actor's greatest challenge to allow an audience to discover the simple joys, the majestic grace, and tender emotions bruised by a callous world. Yet this is what Mary Tyler Moore does best, with her craft, her compassion, and her smile. December 29th, 1937. America is beginning to rise from the gloom of the Great Depression. We had survived a test of the national spirit. There was a hero in the White House, the Sultan of SWAT holding court in the ballpark. And in the community of Flatbush in Brooklyn, New York, Marjorie Hackett and George Tyler Moore welcomed the arrival of their first child, Mary Moore. She was a scrappy and independent child, a loner who craved attention from other children and, more importantly, from her own parents. But Marjorie and George were unable to offer her the emotional support she needed. George was cool and distant, proud of his advanced education, but satisfied with a modest career as a clerk and indifferent to great shows of affection. Mary's mother, Marjorie, had her own demons, an affinity for pinball machines and alcohol. She often indulged in both, confusing young Mary with her changing moods and unstable personality. It was a difficult environment for a child desperate for love but unable to find the intimacy she craved. The eldest of three children, Mary couldn't find camaraderie with a brother and a sister so much younger than herself. So instead of emotional support from her family, Mary found comfort in her imagination and in the movies.
You must keep your knees straight, keep your feet close to the floor, and make your taps clear.
Like many little girls with a dream, she pictured herself singing and dancing in Hollywood musical extravaganzas. So after World War II, when fresh opportunities caused her family to move to Los Angeles, it seemed the answer to a 9-year-old girl's prayers. Hollywood in 1946 was Mary's emotional salvation. Like others who read the glossy screen magazines, Mary was certain that she would be discovered as she sat at a soda fountain or simply walked down the street. Those showbiz dreams were often a distraction for Mary, an uncomfortable student with little curiosity for learning as she longed for her big break. She socialized easily enough with the other girls in school, but there was a distance as well. It was difficult for Mary to reconcile her public and private sides, at once outgoing and independent, yet haunted by a wistful longing for emotional intimacy. By the time Mary had reached high school, the tension was so great she moved out of the family home and in with her Aunt Bertie to another house a few blocks away from her parents. Mary orchestrated an arrangement where she only saw her mother and father on special occasions, And in many ways, Aunt Bertie became a cross between a mother and older sister, helping to nourish Mary's Hollywood dream. While she studied dance and even performed in amateur productions, it was Aunt Bertie who was instrumental in getting Mary her first professional performing job, passing along a tip from a friend about an audition for a dancing elf.
Washer and dryer mean goodbye to wash day. Hot boy.
It was 1955, only days after graduating from high school. Mary was making $10,000 a year on national television as the Hot Point Pixie, advertising appliances on the Ozzie and Harriet television show.
I'm Happy Hot Point. I've been watching Harriet get dinner ready on her Hot Point electric range.
Harriet,
Yes, dear?
what are we having for dinner?
Lamb chops. You like them, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if this dish is too complicated to do at home.
What's too complicated?
This was a phenomenal opportunity for an 18-year-old girl anxious for maturity and independence.
Even the experts do better on a Hot Point. Ask your dealer to show you the new Hot Point electric range. And now, on with the show.
But Mary needed a bigger excuse to finally move away from her extended family. She found that excuse in Richard Meeker, the boy next door. He was young, cute, close, and convenient. That summer they were married, and almost immediately Mary was pregnant. Life is notoriously tough for young newlyweds, and even tougher for pregnant pixies.
My costume was a gray leotard, and pixies, elves, are of neuter gender, so right from the beginning they had me wear, not that I'm all that well endowed, but I had to wear a cupless bra, a bandeau that would get rid of any hint of breasts because of the gender issue. And I was now just the tiniest hint of a belly, which that was all right, but the breasts were enormous. And I had to get back into that same bandeau, and it was probably one of the most excruciating things in my life.
It was obvious that Mary was growing into larger roles, especially that of mother. Her son Richie was born in the summer of 1956, and Mary showered him with the affection she had always craved in her own childhood. There was still the occasional opportunity to dance in television variety shows, but the work was inconsistent and low-paying. With her Hollywood dream still intact, Mary tried her luck at acting. Ironically, it wasn't her smile, but her dancer's legs that got her big break on the detective series Richard Diamond, starring David Jansen. Mary played his secretary, Sam, an unseen woman who answered the phone.
You never saw my face. You'd see a close-up of my mouth or a shot of my leg or my hand doing something. So you could imagine the most incredibly sexy-looking woman while I spoke like this. Hi, Mr. D. I have your messages for you.
Her salary was a mere $90 for a day's work, and when Mary tried to ask for a $10 raise, she was promptly dismissed from the show. But the public curiosity to see the face connected to those sensational legs led to regular guest shots on other shows like 77 Sunset Strip and Hawaiian Eye. These were often bit roles, like this episode of Steve Canyon, where Mary was billed as the second Spanish girl. Or this comedy pilot of Ivy League, which has never before been seen, where she plays a non-speaking role as a college student.
It may seem screwy to you. You don't want to wear a frosh cap, or we can't twist your arm. You don't want to get paddled, or we can't throw you in a brig. But double-crossing the whole campus on rally night just to polish an apple for Dean Henderson, that...
These experiences were small, but important steps in Mary's determined career.
I really wanted to be taken seriously. It's part of the reason that I am called Mary Tyler Moore, because when I went to join Screen Actors Guild, I couldn't register as Mary Moore. There were already 6 Mary Moores at Screen Actors Guild, and that was the limit. I would have to choose another name. And no, I can't choose another name. I'm Mary Moore. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, we'll put the Tyler back in. And anyway, doesn't that sound serious?
Yet Mary was destined for comedy, narrowly missing the opportunity to play the daughter of Danny Thomas on his 1959 situation comedy. The actress for the role had been narrowed down between Mary and Penny Parker, and Mary lost by a nose. a nose which didn't look like it belonged on Danny Thomas's daughter. But a year later, when Thomas, Sheldon Leonard, and Carl Reiner were looking for a fresh face to play a housewife on a new Dick Van Dyke sitcom, Mary was the runner-up they remembered.
All I knew is that when she walked into the office after I saw maybe 60, I swear, 60 people, I said to Sheldon, I'll never find the girl I'm looking for. He said, you'll know when you hear it.
He gave me the script, and I started to read it with him, my heart just fluttering out of control.
She read 2 lines, and I stopped her. I heard something in her voice that got to me.
He put his hand on my head, just like that, and he said, come with me. And he lifted me up out of the chair, and we tore down the hallway and turned right into Sheldon Leonard's office, Danny Thomas's partner, who was going to produce this show, and said, sit down and read it again with me. And he's going like this to the guys. Look at this. And we read it again. And I don't know what was so special, but they all thought it was. And the next day, before noon the next day, I got a call from my agent. You've got the job.
Everything about her was sensual, sexy, lovely, and talented. And I fell in love with her from the first moment I saw her. And I never fell out of love with her. I told her that personally the other day.
It would be the role that would propel Mary Tyler Moore into the national spotlight, placing her in the company of Hollywood's most creative talent and setting a standard for excellence, which would become her trademark. America at the dawn of the 1960s was an exuberant new frontier of science, politics, and pop culture.
Looks good, eh?
The nation was celebrating its youthful vigor. It was the perfect stage for 23-year-old Mary Tyler Moore. Up to this point in her career, she'd only been cast as an attractive second banana. But now Mary was about to find herself in the middle of television's most talented bunch. Rose Marie, Maury Amsterdam, and of course the Broadway song and dance sensation Dick Van Dyke. On September 10th, 1961, America tuned in and saw the birth of the show that would forever change the face of television comedy. It would become a landmark. Originally designed as a vehicle for Carl Reiner called Head of the Family and funded by the Kennedys, the new show was retooled, and its new cast distinguished itself by stretching the fabric of television conventions. The Dick Van Dyke Show was, in part, an autobiography of Reiner's stint as a writer for Sid Caesar's Show of Shows, and Reiner was determined to give the typical sitcom format a fresh, new perspective.
Up until the Dick Van Dyke Show, the wives were extensions of their husbands. They weren't people in their own rights. But Laura was a person in her own right, and I will take credit for this. I was the one who said, this is the way she's going to look. I don't wear frocks.
Mary was everybody's pinup girl. I thought she was gorgeous. When we went into the cutting room to cut, I just loved looking at her. Everybody did. And when she wore capri pants, every male in America went nuts. My son actually touched her behind once when he passed by. She talks about it on the air.
She was 23 at the time and had never done any comedy. She picked it up so fast.
Right.
And her timing was inherent. It was always there.
What'd you win?
Oh, I won a dryer and a rotisserie.
She found out she had a sense of humor. She, no question about that. She knew where to laugh for.
All I hoped was that I could hold my head up with the rest of them.
He got you to say something embarrassing, didn't he? What was it?
That Alan Brady is bald.
She was a perfect straight man. I mean, she made me funny. There's a lot of comedians, and as they say, very few good straight men, and she was the best.
I am surprised you didn't blab about his nose being fixed.
Nose job?
No, up to now it was a secret.
Mary was not the homemaker who just stayed at home and did nothing. It was really the beginning of the kind of the feminist movement here.
I thought we had no secrets from each other.
Well, wait a minute.
And so we were very much on the same level, intellectually and every other way.
I think the fact that Mary and Dick were dancers gave the whole program a grace that very few programs have.
Comedy has a rhythm to it, and singing and dancing all has a rhythm, which is why I love those three. And Mary had those great instincts for that. And we danced and sang together very well right from the beginning. There was something about the match of voices and everything. We were both kind of tall and thin. Everything just worked.
In another stroke of irony, Mary's most comical moments were often the result of tears.
I copied Nanette Fabre. I out and out admit it.
You knew that was a secret, didn't you?
I had actually watched her just for her comedy before that, just because there was some connection I felt to her.
I'm so unhappy.
And so I copied her, and I watched how she would look skyward, and she would hyperventilate, and all those things that I incorporated into my own experience with crying.
She was brilliant at it. Her voice became kind of Hepburnish. It became very much like that.
Rob, as you know, Alan, you see,
What?
The Dick Van Dyke Show struck a resonant chord in television audiences. It seemed to mirror the youthful spirit of the new frontier. Rob and Laura suggested the look of suburban Kennedys in a middle-class Camelot. It was a fantasy that would be shot down on November 23rd, 1963.
We were on the set rehearsing the Van Dyke Show, and I remember the prop man who came out of his little room where he had a radio playing, and he interrupted the director.
And John Chalet, our first assistant director, was sitting in the living room set crying. And we said, "What's the matter, John?"
And I saw John's face fall, and he told us that President Kennedy had been shot, and nobody could quite believe it, but surely he would recover from it, because how could that happen? And then we went into a place where we had a television set, and we watched Walter Cronkite, and we watched him take off those glasses and put them back on, and then make the announcement.
We all just sat down and sat there for the afternoon. We didn't rehearse.
And we came back the following week and had to redo the ending of an episode in which somebody had given Rob and Laura a little turtle with a painting on its back. And there had been a picture of Laura Petrie and Rob drawn on the back of this turtle. And I look at it and I say, "Oh, we look just like the Kennedys, don't we?" And dun, 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 dun. And we had to go back and redo that. That incident in history changed me tremendously, as it did so many people. It's not just a sad and shameful thing, but it was a precipice.
While television audiences didn't see the heartbreak behind the humor, it was easy to recognize the emergence of Mary as a pioneer of the new frontier of television comedians. The challenge of staging a hit half-hour comedy, week after week, was forging Mary's dramatic skills and opening her eyes to greater career possibilities. Rob and Laura Petrie were television's perfect couple. Every week, millions of homes tuned in, making the Dick Van Dyke Show the most popular and important comedy program of the early 1960s.
Alan, whatever you were going to say to Laura, I would rather you said to me.
Okay, Rob, if that's the way you want it. Rob, You're a beautiful girl.
The show's phenomenal success and the pairing of Mary and Dick stood in stark contrast to Mary's relationship with real-life husband Richard Meeker. The long hours in rehearsal, the time away from her own son Richie, and the pressures of work were contributing to the distance and alienation between husband and wife. Married too young, they were now drifting apart. Yet, as suddenly as she fell into the role of Laura, Mary was about to fall in love with an advertising agency executive attached to the program. One evening, while filming on the set of the Dick Van Dyke Show, Mary met Grant Tinker. They were both dazzled. It was love at first sight. He was in the process of ending his marriage. Mary was in the process of ending hers.
In Mary's case, it was instantaneous.
I kind of knew it the moment I met him.
In my case, her impact on me was immediate.
He asked if I wanted to go out to dinner, and I said, no, I think it's a little too close to my separation and divorce from my husband, so thank you.
This woman walked into my life who was exactly the woman that I had never really seen, or only vaguely imagined, perhaps.
He said, I understand. And he started to leave the set, and then he caught himself and turned around and came back, and he said, well, let me ask you this. A friend of mine has a house in Palm Springs. Would you like to come and stay with me for the weekend? And I said, no, thank you. I think that's out of the question, too.
They married only 6 months after they met, with the impulsive spirit of a sudden elopement.
We wanted to sneak into somewhere and get married and sneak out, and we managed that in Las Vegas. I think went in at 11 in the morning, and we were out of there by 1:30 in the afternoon and coming back to Los Angeles.
A new husband, a hit show, and an Emmy Award confirmed Mary's personal and professional arrival. But at the end of its 5th year, at the height of its popularity, the Dick Van Dyke Show did something no other top-rated program had ever done, something completely unheard of in the business. It stopped production. The cast and creative team never wanted the program to get stale, to lose the sense of vitality that was at the core of its appeal. So in 1966, feeling their best work had been accomplished, the show disbanded. While her television family looked forward to some fresh opportunities, Mary's own career took some unexpected and severe hits. It started with Grant securing a deal for her to star in a series of motion pictures, beginning with Thoroughly Modern Millie, a high-profile musical comedy where Mary could live her childhood dream of singing and dancing on the silver screen.
The long-awaited premiere is one of Manhattan's major social events of the season. Millie recalls the delightful days of the 20s, complete with flappers, songs, and dances, with a hilarious story. Star Mary Tyler Moore provides one of the many electrically exciting moments as she arrives. The lovely brunette plays an orphan, Miss Dorothy Brown.
Then came Mary's chance to hit the boards of the Broadway stage in a glittering interpretation of Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I was Holly Golightly in what was hoped to be the musical version of the movie that starred Audrey Hepburn, and it was with all the best people producing it. It was a David Merrick show. Richard Chamberlain was the leading man.
But even that fine pedigree wasn't enough to save this doomed and costly production. When it reached Broadway, the New York critics were unmerciful, giving Mary the first pan of her career. Now 29 years old and without a solid hit since the Dick Van Dyke Show, Mary decided to focus on family and home, and her own son, Richie, now 11 years old. But her attempt to have a child with Grant introduced still another difficult complication.
I had a miscarriage, an early miscarriage, and while I was in the hospital, after that they did a routine blood test and they found that my blood sugar was well above the norm, which is supposed to be 70 to 110. Mine was 750. They were amazed that I was still living and not in a coma at the very least. In fact, I went on to make medical history because of that.
The diagnosis was diabetes. a degenerative disease that often results in blindness and circulatory problems, even leading to amputations and death. For a woman who relied so much on her body as an instrument of her art, the condition was difficult to accept.
Got in the car, went down to the market, and I bought a dozen donuts and drove around Beverly Hills eating these donuts. And got out of the car with the traces of the sugar, the powdered sugar, onto my clothes, and went back into the house. But inevitably, I would get caught by somebody, and ultimately, always, my blood sugar would catch me. And over the years, deterioration has taken place.
It was more important than ever for Mary to find her way back to the stage, even though her diabetic condition would make every aspect of her life more of a struggle. Through the help of her old friend Dick Van Dyke, Mary had a triumphant return to television, co-starring with him in a 1969 musical special where he encouraged her to do what she loved best.
In typical Dick Van Dyke generous fashion, handed the show to me and let me sing and dance and get laughs all over the place. And it was so successful that CBS said, hey, that this woman should have her own show. And it was at that point that Grant decided that if I was going to do my own show, it should be my own production company and that he would head it. And thus began the little empire that could.
The new business, its one show, and its primary star all shared the same name, Mary Tyler Moore. She was poised to be back in the spotlight and again change the face of television comedy.
It was supposed to be a girl so exuberantly happy about the wonderful surprises that life offered and the possibilities of being in that new city. Anything was possible.
The show was about new beginnings, reflecting a liberated vision of women in the 1970s.
When they started the show, Mary Richards was to be a divorced lady starting out again. Well, no way would the network hold still for a divorced woman.
Their reaction to divorce was, there's nothing funny about divorce, and this is supposed to be a comedy series. And not only that, but if Mary Tyler Moore goes on the air in a new show, people are going to think she is divorced from Dick Van Dyke, and that's intolerable.
When the network tested the show with audiences, however, viewers responded with other reservations.
One of the things they hated about it was that there was a strong Jewish influence. Lou Grant was Jewish, Rhoda Morgenstern was Jewish, and these were important characters. These were not funny sidekicks. It was okay to be Jewish if you were a funny sidekick up until then, but, you know, this was something to watch out for.
What religion are you?
Mr. Grant, I don't quite know how to say this, but you're not allowed to ask that when someone's applying for a job. It's against the law.
Want to call a cop?
What eventually won over the hearts of viewers was the show's sense of humorous humanity and the heart behind the blustering of family and friends.
You know what? You got spunk.
Well,
I hate spunk.
What the Mary Tyler Moore Show did most successfully was fuse a magical mixture of the tragic with the comic.
It's Mr. Fee-Fi-Fo. And what did Chuckles ask in return? Not much. In his own words, a little song, a little seltzer down your throat. Excuse me, young lady. You feel like laughing, don't you? Go ahead, laugh out loud. Don't you see, nothing would have made Chuckles happier. So go ahead, my dear. Laugh for Chuckles.
The Mary Tyler Moore Show had the perfect chemistry for the 1970s, blending dry wit with characters whose endearing flaws gave the comedy a realistic edge. The obvious camaraderie of the Mary Tyler Moore cast was equaled by the phenomenal success of Mary and Grant's company. By 1974, Mary Tyler Moore Enterprises was grossing more than $20 million a year and producing such hit television shows as Hill Street Blues, The Bob Newhart Show, Saint Elsewhere, as well as spin-off comedies Rhoda and Phyllis. Yet few people recognized the strain that the enterprise was having on the relationship between Mary and Grant. Overwhelming professional demands were often met by a growing reliance on alcohol. Likewise, the situation further strained Mary's relationship with her teenage son, Richie, who, like Mary herself, was confused with Mom's reliance on drink. The pressure was just too much. In 1976, after 16 years together, Mary and Grant separated.
My husband, Alan Ludden, and Grant Tinker, her husband, they were the very best friends. They'd known each other for over 30 years. So we were all very close, and we went through their separation, and it was a terrible trauma for both of them, an awful one for two other people who adored them.
We were just bowled over. Never expected it to have happened.
It wasn't something the very private Mary wanted the rest of the cast to know.
So one night we were taking Grant to dinner. It was his birthday, and we thought it was, it's close. That's as much as he'd ever let you do. And he said, "Can I bring a date?" And it was the first time he'd ever addressed the fact of dating. And we knew it had to happen sooner or later, so we said, sure. So Alan and I got there ahead, and we were just trying to be brave about this person he'd bring in. And all of a sudden he walked in with Mary. They were reconciled, and it was just so that was the shortest dinner I think we ever spent together. They left very early on.
The reconciliation of Mary and Grant was sincere but short-lived. But after a 17-year run, their eventual divorce would be a parting which would leave them as best friends. Yet this only represented the breakup of one family. By 1977, the Mary Tyler Moore Show was also saying goodbye. Like the Dick Van Dyke Show before it, the program became a part of television history as a top-rated, award-winning class act. Some of the ensemble, like Ed Asner as Lou Grant, went on to spin-off programs featuring their MTM characters. But now, at the age of 40, Mary Tyler Moore was about to experience for the first time what Mary Richards knew all too well: how to be a single woman.
I started doing all the things you normally do when you're in your 20s. Going out on my own, finding a new life, having left Grant Tinker behind, and going to New York and dating, all those awful things, and having to make political decisions on my own and figure out how much tip to leave in a restaurant.
Not only had Mary's television family broken up, but her real-life family was suddenly thrust into heartbreaking tragedy. In 1978, Mary's sister, Elizabeth Ann, then a 21-year-old college student in Los Angeles, died of an accidental drug overdose, sending Mary into another dark period of deep introspection.
And one day I was sitting on the beach looking for some quiet time, and it was tough weather. It was windy, and it was off-season, which is the best time to be at the beach. And I looked and I saw this lady walking along bundled up. And the way she was walking, the way she was moving, suggested that she wanted to reflect and to think and to be by herself. And somehow that got me. It just impressed me. And so I watched her. And as I watched her, I realized it was Mary Tyler Moore. And then I got really interested in her. I guess when you see the show, you didn't imagine her wanting to be alone. You imagined her always surrounded by people full of the kind of energy that she put out. And there she was in this solitary moment, which I was very attracted to that. Anyway, it just went into my head. I didn't do anything with it. I didn't run out and interrupt her walk or anything, or ask for her autograph.
Instead, Robert Redford remembered Mary's solitary image much later when he was preparing to direct his first motion picture, Ordinary People. He had seen a facet of Mary that suggested the character of Beth Jarrett, a woman who loses herself in the bitter chill of a mother's grief.
When I made Ordinary People, I thought that I was using my father as an image for her character. Very strong, very certain that if you will yourself to do something, you can do it.
And it was going to take a certain kind of quality and talent to pull it off. And most of all, and this is what I didn't know, it was going to take courage, because you were going to have to enter into a very unsympathetic area to most people.
I have realized since then that I was really playing a part of myself. I liked Beth Jarrett, and I felt sorry for her that she couldn't let love in to herself, that she couldn't accept her son, the one who lived, and couldn't make a go of life.
The performance was a total departure for Mary, exposing a depth and texture to her dramatic talent that mirrored a sense of conflict and loss she had long felt inside herself.
When that moment comes when a character sees that it's all over, or that everything they believed or thought they had in the palm of their hand has just slipped away and they don't know why or how, that horrible moment and how they handle it is what she had to do. And you can't lead somebody through a moment like this.
1980 was a momentous year for Mary. Ordinary People received 3 Oscars, and Mary's performance was recognized with an Academy Award nomination. It led to Mary's invitation to return to Broadway, this time as a dramatic actress in the acclaimed hit, Whose Life Is It Anyway? Professionally, Mary was on top of the world, exploring the single life and redefining herself as an actress. She was also developing a new relationship to her son Richie, now a young adult looking for his place in the real world. It seemed that the journey of playing Beth Jarrett in Ordinary People had given Mary insights into her own life and son.
Those 2 years that I spent on my own, Richie and I became very close, and Richie began to come to terms with his life and what goals he wanted to set up for himself, and he became a responsible human being, and we became very close. I spoke to him on the phone the night before he died, and he apparently was sitting on his bed holding a gun, one of many that he collected, and the gun went off and killed him instantly. That gun was taken off the market afterwards because it had a hair trigger, and that was the problem. And there has been off and on references to Richie having killed himself, which in fact he did. He died of his own hand, but it was not a suicide. He didn't choose to end his life. It was an accident.
When the headlines announced the death on October 14th, 1980, Mary's private pain became public news. But as she had done throughout her life, Mary tried to find meaning that would transcend the tragedy.
Nobody gets out of this life without paying something. Everybody has something. Everyone has a very heavy weight. And maybe for the moment I've had more than other people have. That's not to say it'll always be that way. But it is the random aspect of life. And I use it to give me the strength to be ready for anything else that might happen. It hasn't yet made me cynical, I hope, but it has made me prepared to accept the temporary aspect of the things we have, whether it's health or work or love, it can be taken away.
But life sometimes has a way of turning things around. The loss of her son Richie changed Mary's life and helped put it into a new perspective. She had enjoyed a career of professional triumphs. Now it was time to become a survivor in her personal life, to confront her demons, to find love. And Mary found a new love, just when she needed it most and expected it the least. His name is Dr. Robert Levine. the physician she met when he treated Mary's mother for a bronchial infection in 1982. They were wed a year later. He's 15 years her junior, and the romance continues today. With Robert's help, Mary has confronted the dependence on alcohol, which had developed over the years of professional and personal stress, dealing head-on with the problem at the Betty Ford Clinic. For diabetics, alcohol can have a devastating and long-term physical impact, complicating and confusing the body's already fragile chemical balance. Those effects are already in evidence with Mary.
I've had a lot of trouble with my eyes. I'm very lucky because of the innovation and use of laser treatment in diabetic retinopathy that I can see, and I see very well, but I have come close many times to losing my sight in one or both eyes, and may still.
Mary gives herself shots of insulin 4 times a day to control the unstable blood sugar levels of her diabetic condition. But to help face the impact the disease has on society, Mary has become a tireless volunteer in efforts to bring the fight to national attention.
By age 45, your chances of getting it are 1 in 20. By age 65, they're 1 in 10. Diabetes isn't just a sugar problem. It's a kidney problem and a heart problem, nerve damage, and for some, diabetes is blindness.
She has been honored as the Person of the Decade by the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, a tribute to her efforts in lobbying members of Congress and appearing in public service announcements to raise funds for research and a cure.
And together we'll find it.
People like me who have diabetes can go out and say, please give us money to research the cure. And they say, well, why? You don't wear braces and you don't have an arm removed and you look perfectly healthy and normal, but we are not. We are maybe not going to be around for very long.
In 1991, Mary faced another tragedy. Her younger brother John was suffering the final stages of kidney cancer. When the pain became overwhelming, Mary assisted him in a suicide attempt by spoon-feeding him crushed barbiturates mixed with ice cream. The attempt failed, but John succumbed to the disease shortly thereafter. Mary Tyler Moore carries on today as she always has over the years, bravely and with determination, showcasing her multifaceted talents by tackling new challenges head-on in both the worlds of film and television. It is no longer for the money, no longer for the recognition, but born of a need to perform, to do what she has done naturally for over 35 years, entertain us, making us think, making us laugh, making us cry, but mostly making us happy to know her. Performers address many roles over a career. Many times the opportunity to play those roles is due as much to coincidence as to deliberate intent. But how an actor finds a common thread between themselves and the range of characters they portray is the true gauge of their talent and an insight into their essence.
Most places you go, if Mary Tyler Moore's name is mentioned, people are protective of her. They won't let you say anything bad about it, and nobody wants to. And it's because of 3 things. Because they have watched her on television for how many years, and they've been satisfied that she's a real person. She's not faking. Laura Petrie felt those things. Mary Richards felt those things.
The thing that's miraculous about Mary is that what you see is what you get, and what she is. The person has developed and matured and is, a happier person even, I would say, the more content person. And I think she will work forever.
When I look back on my life, do you know what? I'm happy that it went the way it did. Certainly there are events that have befallen me in my life that I wish never happened, but of the things that I could change, I'm very happy with what happened.
Although for many years Mary has kept her personal life guarded from public scrutiny, she recently revealed much of the pain and the triumph of her life when she wrote her autobiography. In it, she candidly addresses her many struggles, her alcoholism, her broken marriages, and the book sort of makes it feel as if you're talking with an old friend. But then what else would you expect from everyone's favorite woman, Mary Tyler Moore?